Hello, my name is Daryl Graham, and I'm a speech language pathologist with Holy Spirit Catholic Schools. Today, we're going to talk about some ways that we can support our children at home by using strategies to remind them of their speech sounds. We always start our sessions with a prayer, so today I am going to borrow the Early Learning Program's prayer from St. Teresa School. Dear God, thank you for this day, where I was able to learn and laugh through play. Amen. So let's get started. There's a few things we need to be thinking about before we get into the specific strategies. One of them is we want to make sure that we're working at the level that the child is at. So if a child is not even able to make that particular speech sound, we will talk about a few strategies that we can do just to remind them of that sound, to get them to hear that sound in the speech that we use. If the child is able to use that sound in a word, so they might say wing for ring, and you remind them, oh, it's ring, and they're able to correct it, or they can get it correct most of the time, then that's where we can start to use some strategies to really support them with that word and getting that sound more consistent in their word. The other thing is that some children are quite good at being able to do their sound in an individual word, but it is not yet carrying over into their day-to-day conversations with others. So they may start to say, that's right, it's a ring, right? And then all of a sudden they're saying, you have a wing on your finger, and then you remind them, is it a wing? Right? So that it gets them thinking about that particular sound and getting them to be using it more consistently at a level that's a little bit more difficult for them. The other thing we need to think about when we're reminding children of their speech sounds is that we're really focusing on a sound each time. So your child might have difficulties with several speech sounds. So maybe they're having difficulties with the K sound, so they might say tow for cow. They may be having difficulties with their L sound, so they're saying whittle for little. And they may be having some difficulties with their F sound, so they might say bish for fish. The thing we want to be doing is that when a word comes up, it may have several of those sounds in it, but what we really want them to be focusing on is just one of those sounds each time, because if we're asking them to do too many sounds in those words or in their sentences, then it gets difficult for them, and it gets difficult for you to be able to provide them with that feedback that they need to be able to use those sounds correctly. So what we want to be doing is just making sure that we're just worrying about a particular sound in a word and not worrying about some of the other sounds in that same word or some other sounds in the sentence that they may have said. And lastly, we want to be thinking about ways that we can remind them of their sounds. And again, we will talk about those specifically when we go through the strategies. But we want to really be keeping in mind that we are being specific about what it is that we're asking them to do. So we need to remember to put our tongue in this place when we say the sound or the word. Or we need to be able to, I want you to remember to think about and give them that visual cue that may go along with it. So we'll talk about some of those as well. But being specific and letting them know what it is that they did do correctly, and that's important too, is saying, wow, I really like how you remembered to use your L sound. You said the little cat every once in a while, just to remind them that they are using that sound correctly. Another thing we need to think about is not correcting too much in across the day. We want to pick those opportunities where we can remind them of those sounds. So maybe while we're sharing a book, we may kind of point out a few of the words that they had difficulties with, or we may emphasize a few of the words that have a sound in it that we want them to be a little bit more consistent with through the book. But we don't want to stop them at every point through that book, because the book is a nice opportunity for you to have that conversation and have that social interaction back and forth. We want to really be keeping it specific. Same thing with through the day-to-day. So maybe they're helping you with laundry. You happen to notice that they said pick it up off the floor rather than pick it up off the floor, then that's a great opportunity for you to correct it at that particular point. So again, remembering that we're not doing it too often at one time and not too often throughout the day, so that we don't get the kids frustrated. So now we're going to talk about some specific strategies to help your children at home. The first couple are going to be more specific for those children who are having difficulties being able to make the sound at all, or just some ways that you can quickly remind the child of that sound without putting any expectation on them to be able to correctly produce it. Sometimes even if your child is able to do it at word level or even into those sentences or phrases, it's just a nice opportunity to remind them of how it is that they can produce those sounds. So a perfect example, the first one is modeling. So in this case, all that we're doing is we're just modeling the correct form for that child without any specific emphasis. So it's just strictly, your child might say, I think so, and you say, oh, you think so? So it's just repeating back that particular word to them and not emphasizing, but just kind of making sure that you're correcting that particular sound. The next strategy, which goes with modeling, is emphasizing. So we can add that extra information. We can correctly emphasize that sound so that it becomes more aware to them as they're hearing it. So they might say to you, I see you're wearing your mask, Mommy. And then you say, mask. That's right, I'm wearing my mask. So again, taking that time to have them hear you emphasize and say it without them needing to say the sound or word at all. It's just them hearing it. The next strategy is when the child is starting to be able to use that sound in their words, we want to do some things that are going to help them to be able to consistently start to think of using that sound on their own, or just reminding them throughout the day of where they can, where they might need to correct that particular sound. So the one is called remind. So again, it's just simply, the child might say, I jumped high on the trampoline. So they're having difficulties with that j sound. So we might just say something as simple as, oh, you forgot your j sound. And then they might that might be enough to remind them that they needed to say jump. Or you could say, oh, I heard you say shump. Now remember, we need to use our j sound. Let's try that again. So just a couple of options there. Another example would be, the dog needed a bath. And you could say, oh, don't forget to peek your tongue out for the sound. So then it's bath. So then it's just a simple reminder for that child to be able to remember what it is that they need to do, or just a verbal reminder that they missed that sound and that maybe they could correct that sound for you. Once the child gets a bit more consistent with their sounds, a nice strategy to use is to give them a choice. So, and I find that a lot of kids, they actually respond quite well to this. So one of them could be, an error that a child might make is, again, we'll go back to the mask example, I need to put on my mask. So they forget that K sound at the end. So you could say to your child, did you mean to say mass or mask? And then they would say mask. Sometimes the child might say mass. I said mass. And they might think that they said that, but again, you could remind them that, oh, we forgot our little K at the end. Let's try that one again. Mask. And then we're using that modeling, we're using the emphasizing, and we're doing the reminding. And then we could go back to the choice again. We can say, so did you mean to say mass or mask? Again, it's something that can happen on the fly in a short period of time, and you don't need to really spend too much time on it, because kids can get frustrated a little bit with that, but just kind of take that opportunity, correct it, model it, remind with a little bit of emphasis, and away you go. And the last one is not so much a strategy, is just an awareness piece. And so that is taking the opportunities to be able to support their child with their speech sounds. So one of the ways we can do it, and again, I should kind of say that if book sharing is something that they really like to do, and you find that if you're correcting speech sounds and they are starting to react negatively to it, we don't want the book sharing itself to become a negative thing, because we know that there's so much language rich opportunities within those books with WH questions and talking about what's happened in the pictures and what you think might happen next. So again, we just want to be very careful that we're not overdoing it within the book sharing, because some kids may find that to be a little bit of it's just a little bit difficult for them to be able to do, and they just want to share that book. So play that one by ear and judge it as to where you think that child might be with that. But if they're open to it, I mean, there's opportunities. You know, if the child, there's lots of opportunities for words that would pop up, whether the child is answering a question, whether they're asking you a question, whether they're making a comment about the picture that they're seeing, whether you're talking about what might happen next, for some of those words to come up, and then you'd be able to use those strategies that we talked about before to remind them of how to correctly use that sound. Or if they're not able to use that sound, again, taking the opportunity just to emphasize it or to model it for them to be able to hear it. Some other opportunities throughout the day would be, you happen to be looking out, there's a dog that's walking by, there's a great opportunity, dog. So if you're practicing on that G sound, right? So you can take that opportunity of something that you might see in the day-to-day, where you can remind them, or some of those day-to-day activities that you're doing or your child might be helping you with, whether it's baking or cooking or setting the table. We will be doing a separate video that will look at ways that you can support children with their speech sounds, and there's lots of opportunities for language as well within those particular sessions. Within those particular opportunities. So look for that session to be posted about some things that you can do in the car to support them, things that you can do at home, things that you can do when you're out in the park. So there'll be a separate session for that. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time listening to this. If you do